In this lesson, we're going to learn how to save paths, convert paths into selections, and convert selections into paths. Let's begin, as always, in our Chapter 8 folder with the file clipping path. Now we're going to start out with a white layer. Let's select it in the Layers panel to make sure it's active. And in the interest of time, we're going to create a path with our shape tool. Yes, our shape tool. Remember, I mentioned earlier that we can create paths with the shape tool if we select the path mode. So in the options bar, instead of the shape layer mode, we're going to click on the path mode. We're going to use a custom shape. I'm going to change one option here. I'm going to select from center. And in these shapes, let's choose a different shape library. In this right triangle, we're going to scroll down and choose Banners and Awards. We'll hit OK to replace the contents, and let's select this big old trophy. Now we're simply going to draw. And if you'd like to move the path while you're drawing it, simply hold down the space bar. That lets you move the path around the image until you have it precisely where you want it. That looks pretty good. I'm going to release the space bar and release the mouse button. It's important to understand, however, that when you create a path, it is not saved. The initial path is known as a work path, and you can see in our Paths panel, it is named this work path. Work paths are temporary. They are not saved with your document. If I were to close this file right now, this path would be lost forever. Not such a big deal in our case, but let's imagine for a second that this was a painstakingly hand-drawn path that we do not want to lose. We move to the Paths panel, click on the triangle at the top right, and save path. Very, very important. We get to name it. Let's call this trophy. Now, no matter how much we modify it or edit it, it will be saved with our image in its most current state. Well, what can we do with paths? We've seen in the last lesson how we can stroke them and fill them, but we can also convert paths into selections. At the bottom of our Paths panel, the third icon from the left is a Load Selection button. We'll press that, and now we have a selection. Well, what can we do with a selection? One thing we can do is fill it. Let's go to the Edit menu, down to Fill, and I've got Pattern selected, and I'm simply choosing one of the two custom patterns that Photoshop ships with. So we'll hit OK. Now we've filled that with a pattern. We could also fill a path with a solid color. I'm going to click back on the path to activate it. In the tool panel, I'm going to click on the Path Selection tool, and I'm going to click and move this path. Notice we have a selection and a path. The path is separate now from that selection. By moving this trophy path, we can make a selection out of it. So I'm going to go back to our Paths panel, click on the Load Selection button. Now we have a selection active where we move the path. Again, back to the Edit menu, Fill, and this time we'll just use a color. Let's choose something down here maybe. Hit OK, OK again, and there we go. So once we have a path, we can easily convert it to a selection. We can use that to make shapes. We could use that to make cutouts over images. Lots of possibilities there. We can also do the opposite. Take a selection and convert it to a path. Let's see how that works. I'm going to turn off this top layer. I'm going to deselect that trophy by hitting the M key to switch to the Marquee tool and clicking anywhere in the image. There's also a keyboard shortcut to deselect. It's Control-D on Windows, Command-D on the Mac. And on this background layer, I'm going to go to Channels. In this image, I have saved an alpha channel that is actually a silhouette of this child. I'm going to show you what that looks like. There is our silhouette. I'm going to click on the alpha channel, and at the bottom of the Channels panel, there is a Load Selection button. So I'm going to click that, and that is simply going to make a selection from this alpha channel. I'll turn our RGB channel back on, turn the alpha channel off. So now we have a selection, a tight silhouette around our subject. In the Paths panel, I can make a work path from this selection. It's the fourth icon from the left. I'm simply going to click. Now you can see that I have a work path. Now what did we say about work paths? They are temporary. If we close this document right now, that work path is gone. So we are going to go in our Paths panel, click on the flyout menu, and save path. We'll name this Silo, short for silhouette. Now what can we do with this path? Well, if you're working on an image that's ultimately going into a page layout program, such as InDesign, we can make what's called a clipping path. A clipping path will allow this image to be placed in a page layout and automatically remove the background image. Our selection is just of the child riding on this toy. The background, the sky, the mountain are going to be removed. We can convert our saved path, Silo, into a clipping path simply by going back to the top of the Paths panel and select Clipping Path. We're going to choose which item we want to make the clipping path. Here we have the choice between Trophy and Silo. We're going to select Silo and simply hit OK. Now, if we pass this image along to the page layout department and they were to place this in a magazine, they could choose any background behind this that they wanted to, or they could just let it float free on the page. So paths are very useful when you think about them as a method for both creating selections and receiving selections to make clipping paths.